For all your medication and narcotic tracking needs, check out the LogRX app, created by career fire and EMS professionals. That's LOGRX.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
We don't live in a vacuum here. I think that we take a look at how our community operates, local community government. We take a look at how the community interacts with each other on the business level. And I believe that the DEI training essentially takes a look at our weaknesses, our biases, our strengths, and try to get us to understand each other better. Welcome to Fire Service Court Radio. Today, John Murphy is going to be your presenter on an issue that is somewhat controversial in the corporate world and maybe even in our world. But I'm recording this presentation from Las Vegas, which is kind of cool, actually, because I was invited down to make a presentation yesterday at EMS World. First time I've ever done that. And we did talk about EMS issues and trying to create a liability-free workplace. Got a good turnout, good feedback, and got invited to 4 more conferences around the country next year. So all in all, it was a successful message, getting out, trying to create that liability-free environment. And today, taking a few minutes anyway to talk about DEI policies for EMS and fire, which, like I said, is somewhat controversial. I think that one of the things that we believe in is basically that EMS fire is a multiracial organization. The reality is it consists of mainly white males, a few women, and some minorities. And then litigation, as we see and have seen in the past, and as we have presented in prior radio shows, litigation primarily focuses on discrimination, harassment, retaliation against people of color and women. And although we think we're a family, we don't generally treat our family the way we treat ourselves in the fire station. Some of the times, not all the times, but we're not really a family, right? So I think we need to get over that myth. And then some lawsuits are related to operational issues, but people issues are the main focus of most of the litigation that we see in the fire service. The awards, if they do go to trial or get settled out of court, are significant, in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And many times the plaintiff keeps their jobs. Others retire or go off to other occupations. Whereas they wanted to be a firefighter or EMS provider, they're denied that chance based on sort of the activities that occurred in the stations. According to our statistics, pretty much we're a predominantly white male organization, as I said before. These particular numbers demonstrate the percentile of women and African American people of color and Asians, Hispanic and Latino, which is clearly in the minority. And so most of the litigation that we see involves these sort of minority groups in our fire stations. And so the question is, what and how can we do that or make it better for people to survive in an organization that may be inherently hostile to them? And I grew up in that organization after 32 years in the fire service, and I see what can happen if we're not real careful about maintaining our policies and training and those sorts of things, preventing discrimination, anti-retaliation, training and policies and that sort of stuff. EMTs and paramedics in the public and private sector, statistically, we're a huge group of organized individuals providing services to our communities. And the NAEMT, which is a portion of this conference I'm here at this week, indicates that the fire department with cross-trained EMS personnel is about 40%, and the fire department with separate EMS personnel is 9%, which is EMS only in some organizations. Government or third service, and the private companies make up the remainder. And there's a large contingent of private providers in our country. Some are independently owned. Some are hospital based. Third service in a city or community certainly weigh into the overall delivery of quality EMS in our country. In the private sector, again, the gender shift is women are in the minority, men are in the majority. The average age is 36 years old, which I found relatively surprising because when you go to this conference, there are a lot of gray haired people here that have been in the profession for a very long period of time and continue to serve their particular communities. And then the ethnicity issues, as you see in that bullet number 4, is the makeup that we've been talking about on the front end of this presentation. The population, the Census Bureau in 2020 indicates that there's a large population of minorities in our country. I think what has happened is that during the Census Bureau retake of the population in 2020, there is some improvement in the way they document who is a minority, who's Asian, and it took a look at the multiracial components of our country and further define those in the questionnaires that you filled out. You may not realize that you did that, but yes, you did in 2020. So, and they say that by 2050, no racial or ethnic group will make up as much as 50% of the population of the United States. And their conclusion is the United States will become a nation of minorities. So, in your fire station or your EMS station, just take a look at who's around you. Is it predominantly white? Is it predominantly male? Um, is it predominantly women or people of color or other historically minority population in your station, as opposed to what is out in your community? So, is your community mixed race? And does your organization reflect the face of your community? And I can unequivocally say it probably does not, based on who comes to the door to want to be a fire or EMS provider, and then who we're letting in the door to become an EMS and firefighter. One of your important leadership traits, I think, as a fire chief or an officer in an organization, is we want to create a safe workplace for your employees. We always push let's be safe on the street. Everyone comes home at the end of the day, and I think what we're trying to do is create an environment where people come home at the end of their shift, but they want to go back to work in a harassment and discriminatory free organization. So, as a leader of your organization, it's incumbent on you to ensure that there is a safe workplace for all of your firefighters and that they do actually want to come back to work, tomorrow. And we've done a good job on the street side of it. We need to do a better job on the station side of it as well. Some training programs are out there, lots of training that deals with discrimination, harassment, retaliation, those sorts of things. I think that those are important classes to present in your organization. One of the class availabilities is the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion class, which has become recently pretty politicized, so much so that some government agencies and several corporations, educational institutions, some fire departments are even afraid to talk about DEI in those terms. And the reality is that DEI is not a threat to our organization. It basically trains us to recognize the differences in our workforce and recognize the value that other people that may not look like me or you contribute to an organization. So I think it's a good program. I've read a lot about it. I have never taken the class, but it's not that I won't take the class. It's just opportunity hasn't presented itself at this time. The D in is diversity, embracing the difference that everybody brings to the table. It talks about, we don't want to create a group think of the same orientation of how to solve problems in your organization. So I think the DEI component of it kind of looks at leveling the playing ground when it comes to equality and equity. in your organization. The E is the equity section. Equity is treating everyone fairly and providing equal opportunity, not only in promotions for one, but opportunity to move up in an organization. And even not moving up in an organization, you can still be a leader at a rank that you currently hold. So you do have to be a lieutenant or a captain in order to make an influence on your organization. And the answer is no. We have a lot of leaders that are in the lower ranks that influence greatly the direction of the department, and you have to admire those particular skills. The I is inclusion and respecting everyone's voice and creating a culture where people from all backgrounds feel encouraged to express their ideas and perspectives. So the DEI component is, I think it makes your organization, or will make your organization, functions more smoothly and get rid of some of the rough edges and around some of the opportunities that people have or are going to have in your organization, and creates I think, a better educated pathway for you and those people that are in your organization that, again, don't necessarily look like you. The DEI training, aims to foster a culture of respect, as we talked about a little bit before, and then trying to address the biases and barriers that we see in the workplace. And we bring in a lot of bias. I mean, when I came into the fire service, I had a religious background from my parents. I had a military background, and I had a college education, um, and I had biases that were kind of learned or ingrained through my passage through life, especially starting out with my parents, who were awesome parents, but they were biased as well, and so some of that bias comes into our personalities, and we bring that to work. I think what the DEI training does and should do is help you recognize what your biases are and how to deal with them. Not trying to get rid of them, because I think um, that is who you are, but we need to sort of, how do we play well in the sandbox, I guess, for the lack of a better term, and ensure that people have equal opportunity in your organization, doing the job, creating the equitable workforce, and then making it, again, a safe place for people to go home and then come back to. And again, we just talk about the differences in the diversity part. We're not all the same. Obviously, I took a look at that picture earlier. That's the makeup of your community, and that should be the makeup of your department. And then we talk about the equity component and the inclusion part of it. Is a variety of people of power, and so you are in a position of power. I think it's important that we allow other people to share in the power position in your organization, only to make it stronger for other members of the organization, and also make it a better community partner when you bring this equity aspect into your organization. And again, we have to take a look at outside. So we don't live in a vacuum here. I think that we take a look at how our community operates, local community government. We take a look at how the community interacts with each other on the business level. And I believe that the DEI training essentially takes a look at our weaknesses, our biases, our strengths, and try to get us to understand each other better. And so there's the opportunity to lower the barriers that may present itself in your department, and creates this sort of sense of well-being, and have a better education as to how each personality plays into the overall personality of your organization, and again, how it interacts with a community who's our entire support. So remember that the community, we depend on the community for existence, on the financial side and the continual support, especially on property tax and financial issues and those sorts of things. And so we want to engender good working relationships internally and externally. Some history behind this whole movement is that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act established the Equal Opportunity Commission, EEOC, which works to eliminate employment discrimination in the 60s and 70s, you see that there's been a lot of increase of lawsuits based on the opportunity to file a lawsuit to right the wrongs in some work environments. And then a lot of private sector companies began incorporating diversity into their businesses by providing DEI training, according to a 2008 report um, uh, from a very well-known academic institution. The diversity training efforts emerged when John Kennedy was the president and initiated an affirmative action program. And although the two concepts may seem similar, affirmative action differs from DEI because it requires federal contractors to treat all applicants and employees equally. College and universities also used affirmative action to boost enrollment of their students of color. And so we saw sort of equity at the university levels. Um, and there's been we'll talk about this in a second, a recent court ruling essentially in June banned the use of applicants' race in university admissions with the argument that doing so is discriminatory and involves racial stereotyping. And for those who are, for those of you who are interested in doing some research on it, you can look at the SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States website, and pull up the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and the University of North Carolina. Employers, again, are not really affected by this particular ruling, although it's important that you understand what the ruling is. And so if you're using an affirmative action program in your organization to hire people, you need to see how that affects you or it doesn't affect you. And again, there's been some letters that have gone out from some organizations to advise lawyers who advise the universities and other corporate entities of this sort of Students for Fair Admissions ruling and how it affects their hiring practices. And if you are taking a look at the news media, you've seen, let's see, Coors Beer, Ford Motor Company, Microsoft, one of my institutions that I teach at have pulled their DEI programs from their operational plans, and so the reports are relatively inconsistent right now as to how has it affected the workforce in those organizations. But I think we'll see more results in 6 to 8 months or up to a year, and see if it made a difference in how the organizations function and hire and retain services of all people. There's been some in the newspaper of declining enrollment. I think MIT, Harvard, for one, a couple other main institutions have noticed a drop in minority applicants and minority individuals coming in and being part of the student body based on this sort of ruling. So it has a dramatic effect, I think, on the educational side of those institutions. But we haven't seen anything right now in our service, in the fire service, and we're waiting to see how this affects corporate operations by getting rid of the DEI programs. Now, they may have substituted it with something that may be less controversial, achieves the same goals, but we don't really know that right now because they're not forthcoming as to, okay, so we replace DEI. Now do we do more anti-discrimination, retaliation, and eliminating hostile work environments, which essentially replaces the DEI programs. So as we talked about, the absence of affirmative action, and again, we as employers need to follow the federal and state rules for hiring. And again, that's all in your policies and practices that protect those that are considered to be a protected class, right? So, and incorporating and including sexual orientation and gender identity, which has been in the forefront, I think, in our institution more than we have seen in the past. So, I think, again, when you're hiring people, you're hiring them for skills that they can bring to the table. You're hiring them for character. You're hiring them for their value to the organization, and sometimes it's it could be anybody, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the white guy. It could be the person who's classified as a minority and comes in and greatly enhances the um, um, I guess the outcomes or the output or the service provided by your organization to your community. And again, the DEI, or I'm sorry, the court ruling didn't address the employment-based DEI initiatives. And again, I think you as leaders and your attorneys need to take a look at how this affects your organization individually, where you take a look at the Title VII um, parameters, I guess, and guidelines have always prohibited race-based quotas and individual hiring promotion decisions that discriminate based on race. So for us, it shouldn't be much of a change, but there are some organizations going to say, look, we can't do this anymore. We can't be hiring um, equitably. This is what our hiring practices are. And I can tell you for the challenges that you're going to get from people who may not be, admitted or entertained as a possible candidate, always has a bad side effect on operations of your particular organization. So going back to DEI, what does it accomplish? And again, it talks about understanding each other's cultural differences. And so again, we talk about let's get people from your community with a diverse background. We need to make sure that we take a look at our DEI or discrimination training programs or whatever you want to call it to their strategic plans and methods of operations. And again, diversity is related to growth strategy in an organization. You see this a lot in the corporate world, how we're going to grow our organization. And it's the same in the public sector. In our world, we need to say, how can we offer opportunity for people from within the community and make our department stronger so we provide a better service to those in our community. So we don't exist in a vacuum, as I said before. Diversity also refers to organizational diversity, such as identity politics. And then the equity aspect of it refers to the concepts of fairness and justice, such as fair compensation, substantive equality with promotions, and opportunities within the organization. So we need to take advantage of the strengths of the organization. We need to identify the weaknesses of our organization, and we need to correct those particular weaknesses. So if you take a look at the illustration on the left side, equality, you get everybody gets the same box, but there's no advantage in there, right? The equity aspect of it is the shorter person gets the most boxes, so they can actually see the baseball game, where the taller person doesn't need any boxes because he's already watching the baseball game. So just take a look at and how are we applying that concept to our organizations on equality and equity. The lessons employees can learn from the Supreme Court ruling. And again, this is an internal issue. I think we need to be on top of what the changes are in federal law and what the Supreme Court decisions have done and how do they affect us directly. So we want to maintain or develop new ways to measure the outcomes and benefits of a diverse workplace. Review your DEI offerings or whatever you're doing in your organization to educate our firefighters and as to their differences, as to their strengths, their weaknesses, their biases, either conscious or unconscious. And then how can we take advantage of those to make our workforce better? Take a look at our hiring practices and initiatives. So the initiatives are, recruiting. How do we recruit people to come in to our organization, especially in a time right now that we're having a very difficult time retaining the newer generation of firefighters as opposed to the old duffers like myself, the baby boomers who came in expecting, a good solid um, opportunity to learn and to provide to our community, make a livable wage, support a family. There's a little bit different temperament in today's workforce, and you guys that are doing the hiring and retention programs understand how that all works, and maybe can offer some insight later on in an article if you should write it for fire engineering, or just promote those sort of programs in your community. And then you want to take a look at the leadership of your organization. Is it diverse in its thinking and actions? Does it promote diversity in the organization, or is it under the old leadership, it's either my way or the highway sort of stuff, and we're not going to change because of external forces. But I can tell you that external forces are going to change us, and sometimes the only way to get change internally is through attrition. So if the fire chief or the leadership leaves, then you can move up younger individuals that may have a little bit more diverse thought process about diversity and those sorts of things. And then, are we able to utilize different training programs? Do we want a lot of tools in our toolbox? And I say, yeah, right. So anti-discrimination training, and there's lots of different programs out there. Some you can combine into one, some you need to do individually. But I think this is just a partial sample of the what goes on in the world of training that you should probably bring into your organization to again level the playing field for everyone who is in the organization, so they do have equal opportunity, and they're not working in a discriminatory, biased workplace. Because and those of you who have been discriminated against, and I certainly have not, but I deal with a lot of people that have called me or retained my services in order to address the issues in an organization because they're being discriminated against or they're being retaliated against. And so these training programs are good. There's a lot of it depends on the delivery um, person and the attitudes of people that are taking the class. But if we're looking at change and people are willing to do some changing or to improve current operations in your department, then I believe that, instead of just focusing on the DEI part of it, which for some people is like, oh no, we're not going to talk about that. Talk about diversity and inclusion training, talk about sexual harassment training, talk about these trainings that are up on the slide, which I think will improve operations internally and create a compatible workforce that people actually want to come back to work tomorrow. So, is DEI training for everyone? I think the concept of DEI training does it have to be the DEI format? My answer is no. I think there's a lot of good other training programs that are available to your organization that you should be taking advantage. We're not required by law to teach DEI. I don't know where that concept came from. I just want to dispel that particular myth. Um, but I think we're required by law to create a discriminatory free workplace. And that's incumbent on us to provide the training and then hiring people that are going to come into your organization that will adopt and adapt to your organization's culture. Some in the corporate world are promoting this merit, excellence, and intelligence, the MEI concept. I don't think it's taken on. I know there's been some fire departments and firefighters have been publicly outspoken on merit based promotions and those sorts of things. I'm kind of on the fence on that one. I think it's this MEI thing could be problematic because the people that are making decisions on whether I'm going to be promoted or not is probably a person that's a white male, will probably promote those that fit my stereotypical mold. And so we leave in a whole population of people out in your organization that may be more qualified, but not having the opportunity because of the person that's making those choices for promotions under the MEI concept. And then I think the one things when we're talking about recruitment and retention, uh, you got to figure there's a lot of people out there that want to join your organization. They don't all look like you. I think as leaders, we need to create an opportunity for those knocking on the door to try to get into our organization. I know that in my state of Washington, it seems like every department is hiring. So, a lot of opportunity for people. I'm not so sure there's enough workers that actually want to become fire and EMS providers. And so there's a struggle, I think, to balance that factor. And then the other part is retaining our people as well. And so creating a diverse workforce, and that's equitable and fair in an organization and doesn't discriminate against anyone in your organization, I think creates that retention policy and retention practice that assists your organization with survival, really, on staffing. So let's take a look at your organization and how we're being compatible with these sort of anti-discrimination particular programs. And then you want to support your programs with these must-have policies. I know that my colleagues, Kurt Verone and Brad Pinsky, are doing policy creation. So if you're interested, Lexipol does policy creation. Your insurance companies will do that. You can do your own. You can plagiarize other people's, but you want to make sure that if you do the plagiarization side, that they meet your standards and not somebody that you took them from. So you need a mission statement, and all the things that you see in this particular slide will assist your organization. And so the leveling of the playing field that we talked about it, the DEI in that second panel down there shows that 2023 survey by the Pew Research Center found that 52% of employed U.S. adults said they have DEI training or meetings at work, and they have members in there that manage a division of their particular organization that manages their DEI programs, right? So, and then the critics are out there saying DEI programs are discriminatory. Those who have taken the class are sort of in favor of the DEI programs because of the awareness aspect of, these are my unconscious biases. How can I eliminate them and create a harmonious workplace? And finally, having a diverse workforce represents your stakeholders is good for business. And we're not considered ourselves as a business. We're a service provider. But certainly people take a look at us from a delivery standpoint. And so how are we delivering that service with well-trained firefighters and EMS providers? And again, we want everybody to come home at the end of the shift, but we also want people to come back to work tomorrow because they feel comfortable in their workplace. And I want to thank you for spending the 40 minutes or so, actually 30 minutes, with me on DEI, discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. And I say, be safe, be legally safe, and until next time, take care of yourself.
For all your medication and narcotic tracking needs, check out the LogRX app, created by career fire and EMS professionals. That's LogRX.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit TenCateFabrics.com/Flex 7.